Welcome to Not Another Whiskey Podcast. If you're looking for mind-melting facts about chill filters, parts per squillion, and numbers of staves per washback, then sadly, my dear chums, you have come to the wrong place. I'm Daz, your co-host.
And I am Mitch. Thank you for tuning in and listening to our chat about all things whiskey in the whiskey world. So the plan for this episode was to do an in-person podcast, which Daz and I were in Lewis last week. And we were going to sit down. We actually took all the gear all the way over to Lewis. And then we stayed in a really cool place that had a full-size snooker table, ping pong table, a massive bar. We took a load of whiskey over. That kind of got in the way a little bit, doesn't it? So we didn't really fulfill our plan there, which was
we failed miserably. As I suspected, we might. Pool, table tennis. You were skinny dipping at one point. So yeah, a few things got in the way.
Yeah. Have you deleted those photos yet, by the way?
No. Just right. As well as the podcast, right? I can give a full description if you want.
Great trip though, man. You had a good time?
Yeah, it was class. It was really nice. I was really surprised actually. A couple of things that stood out for me was going to the Harris Distillery. Walking into there, they were running their second peated run, and as soon as I walked into the still house, I was like, this is peated malt, what's going on here? You know, it was really cool. And to hear that it was their second one from Shona, who took us around, she's one of their whiskey makers, was really cool. And just how beautiful the island was. Not a place I've been before. Don't know a lot about Lewis and Harris. Been on Orkney and Skye, Isla, Jura, all these lovely places, but not a place I knew a lot about. So yeah, it was really, really amazing. And the weather was pretty kind to us. It was grey most of the time, but we didn't get rained on. We didn't get caught out, which was great.
Only half a day in Midges. And we did a live in-person tasting, which was pretty cool, in a pub. Almost felt like it was back to normal that day. Scotland game was on right afterwards. That was shit. Let's not talk about that. But anyway.
Few decent whiskies. We did the Dalmore Portwood. We did Balvenie, Caribbean cask, which was delicious. Have to say that, of course. And we did a wee Highland Park 17-year-old dark as well, which Teddy took us through, which was really nice. I haven't tried enough Highland Park, any of the new ones anyway, over the last 2 or 3 years. I should have tried more, but that was a banger. Takes you back to the old days of the good old 18s and stuff we used to put out there. So yeah, very good.
Nice wee Balvenie that Gemma brought along as well. That was a good time. So anyway, enough about Lewis. What we're going to do for this episode instead is we have a very special guest, our second only guest on the podcast. And what we're going to do, based around this special guest that's coming on, we're going to talk about family distilleries in Scotch whisky and how they work. So I've been lucky enough to work for one of these families for 10 years of my whisky career, which was William Grant and Sons, who own both Glenfiddich and Balvenie single malts. But to give us a little bit more of an inside track, we are joined today by Kirsten Grant Meikle, who is actually one of the members of the Grant family and very much involved in the business. Kirsten, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys, and good to see you both again.
I know, it's been a while.
So
let's
I was going to say, I can say that and mean that.
Daryl, it's been a while. Mitch, it's not been a while.
For me, it's been, like 3 weeks since?
No less.
Yeah, so I think we'll chat. Let's go back in history a little bit and talk about how we all kind of met, because your background, Kirsten, goes back to Matthew Clark, right? I mean,
even before that, Mitch, I used to run a bar in Edinburgh called Echo Vino up in Coburn Street. Still there. Yeah. Worked for Derek up there, and then I did that for a couple of years, and then I went to Matthew Clark as a sales role, basically. Padding the pavements in Edinburgh, talking to all you guys.
I know that's the funniest thing, because I had no idea what your role would be in the end in the William Grant's family, because I didn't know part of it. Yeah. I didn't even make the connection. I don't think I was ever aware of it. It was probably because you and Tara. You became Tara's boss in the end down the line for the wine business then as well. And I just always remember you guys as just being like really good fun and great to be around. And it was really, really easy to work with you guys. And obviously down the line, you became heavily involved in the whiskey side. And that's when I was like, oh, that's Kirsten from Matthew Clark. I must be the only person that says that to you, you know.
No, I still get that every now and again. You see, so and like just basically from guys in your position who, when we were doing all the bars in Edinburgh. So yeah, it was really fun days. And I don't know, at that time the company it was called First Drinks. After Matthew Clark started, and the William Grant part of the business was called First Drinks. So, and there was a girl at First Drinks called Raina Gallagher. So when I was at Matthew Clark and Raina was representing First Drinks, we also had a bit of fun with going around seeing you guys. And yeah, that must be, we're talking like 12, 13 years ago now.
Yeah, at least, right? I remember the first time I met you was when I was with Diageo. And
Yeah.
Clark, and I had to do a 101 whiskey seminar for you guys. And
Yeah.
You might have a little bit of whiskey background. It was in Dundas House in Glasgow.
Oh yeah.
And then you told me your kind of background. I was like, well, I don't really need to be teaching you any of this stuff.
Well, to be honest though, Mitch, at the time, you know, I obviously knew about the products and that, but I didn't have an in-depth, deep knowledge of whiskey back on those days because I hadn't really been brought up around the distillery. So my father was brought up in Glendronach Distillery, and he came down to Edinburgh to go to the art school. So he'd moved away basically from Speyside. And so we didn't really spend much time up there. So whilst I knew obviously a lot about the company and stuff, I didn't have the knowledge that I've got now, definitely, because I'm now in the business and working with the products every day. So
yeah. Well, and let's chat about this, because I think that's quite an interesting fact that you touched on, right? I think, well, I know for a fact that back in the day with the Grant family, it was a case of, right, you got the second name, get in the business, this is going to be your job title. But it's definitely not like that anymore. I mean, you're a classic example of that. You've worked yourself up through the ranks to get where you are within the business, and you've got such a vast knowledge, experience of the drinks industry now, right?
Yes. So, I mean, it's definitely not like that now. And, you know, there's many more of us now than there was before because, you know, I'm fifth generation. So, you know, every time you go down a generation, your family gets bigger and bigger. So, and just because your name is Grant, in no way secures you any type of role at the company. So, yes, take the present situation. I have about 45 cousins and 5 of us actively in the business at the moment. So, and there's a number of reasons for that. Some of them don't want to be, some of them don't have the skill set to do it. Some want to be, we don't want them. You know, it just depends on the circumstances. So, yeah, it's working out. When I joined Matthew Clark, the intention wasn't to then that to be a stepping stone to Grant. I joined Matthew Clark because I really enjoyed the drinks business, and then actually after I did a couple of years of, you know, the sales girl in Edinburgh role, I went into the wine side of the business. I finished up really with a big wine background. So, but, you know, these skills are all transferable into what we do now. So that's one of the reasons I ended up in the business was my Uncle Charlie Gordon recognised the skill set and the customers that I knew and all the rest of it, which would be able to bring a valuable skill to William Grant. And particularly he was wanting me to, you know, develop the on-premise side of the business, which for a long time had been neglected somewhat at William Grant's. We were very much a grocery company. And when I went into the business at Grant's, my first role was called Project Transformer, and that was a huge investment into the UK on-premise. So, you know, I got a lot of support and money to build a team, you know, I took some of the best people, you know, and built a really strong on-premise team. So you can see now the difference between William Grant's 12, 13 years ago and our focus on the on-premise now. And that was all a big part of my uncle's influence and what I was brought in to do.
That's it. No, that's so true. You know, I think when you look at it now, from the outside looking in, Grant's is very strong in that particular area. And so thanks for thinking of me when those roles were coming up. That's really kind of you. But I think it's so interesting though, isn't it? When you think about like the family businesses, and it will come with its positives, and there'll also be the other side of that as well, where it will bring its challenges. And it's interesting actually when you break it all down. Say there's 140 malt whiskey distilleries in Scotland, right? And maybe 4 of the really well-known distilleries are still in, or 4 companies are still in kind of family ownership. When you think about it, you've got Glenfiddich and Balvenie, which of course belong to your family. You've got Glenfarclas in there, and you've got Springbank. obviously there's Kilholmans and stuff which have come up in kind of more recent years, but they're pretty much first generation businesses, you know.
There's a lot of that. Yeah. So, there's lots of the smaller guys are family owned businesses at the moment because it's first generation. So, they say, family businesses, you make first generation, make it, take it, break it. So, so if you can get past the third, that's when you really know you've got a family business.
Is that right? That's good knowledge. So if anyone's out there thinking about setting up their own business, is third generation, they're going to get the benefits.
The first make it, the second take it, the third break it. And the stats are quite interesting around getting past the third generation. So you can get to fifth or sixth, you're in a pretty good position. But then, our biggest mantra at the moment is you get quite into being quite a big company. It's like, how do you get big, stay small, get big, stay small, which is one of the discussions we have a lot at home.
Because that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've never worked for my own business. I've never worked for a family business. My background is Diageo, Edrington, and here I am now working for White & Mackay, and it's treat it like it's your own. How can you really have that mindset unless it truly is yours, and there'll always be a little bit of that, right? So is that something that you guys are going to feel very close to, that kind of mindset, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, every day we have things happen or whatever where, because I work in the business, my cousin's the chairman at the moment, and it is, we do see things differently, and so we do go off rants about stuff because we're looking at things in a completely different way to a lot of people, and that can cause, obviously it's going to cause some kind of friction, but we're always looking to the long term. So when we see things that are not based on that, then we get upset about that. However, you've also, one of our biggest challenges at William Grant's is getting to scale brands, So we're very good at incubating and building these great brands, but then we need to learn a bit more about going to scale, because previously we've been rather precious about all that stuff. And we need to teach ourselves how to behave bigger as well, in terms of our processes and our ways of working and just some of the outlooks that we have and the decisions we make. But at the same time, there'll always be this tension to remain family owned and close to the business.
Yeah, because that's a healthy tension. I'm always so fascinated by the sense of responsibility. I feel that, whatever whiskey distillery, especially Edrington and White & Mackay, is when you meet former distillery managers, you meet people who have worked there 40, 50 years, whose parents worked at these distilleries. You guys have it. I've met Dennis McBain and these types, where you spend time with them and you realize just how much it means to them. And it's that kind of standing on the shoulders of giants. Now, that responsibility for me as an employee, I feel it, So as somebody whose uncles, aunties, grandparents, generationally, you must feel that pressure quite heavily, I suspect.
It's massive, and this is what, sometimes I'll go off and on a tangent about something. I said, but guys, you need to understand that, it's not going to break on my watch, and the responsibility that you have for all your employees. We've got 2,800 employees, and all the employees before that. So using Dennis as a great example, and he's 60 years he's been employed by us. He started when he was 15. So, if we were the ones to break it, it would be like, you would just break people's hearts, And also, I think in some ways we're quite an inefficient company, because sometimes we just do stuff because we want to do it, not because the accountants tell us. And, for example, I think Dennis retired 8 or 9 years ago, and we're still paying him. So, and we make decisions, things like, the wood purchases, or, building the new stillhouse of Glenfiddich and Tullamore and all these places. We don't cut corners, so we're never going to listen to the accountant, because, there's a great story around Tullamore where the head engineer said to my cousin Glenn, we've got these different types of stone. This one's £5, this one's £10, this is £50. And he said, which one's going to look the best in 100 years? And he said, oh, that one, but that's the most expensive. And he said, and my cousin said, that's not what I asked you. I asked you which one's going to look the best in 100 years, So you got to think about these sort of decisions. So it doesn't seem that obvious to some people at the time, but we are responsible for building more of the foundations to keep the business going.
Mm-hmm.
Let's I want to just kind of rewind a little bit and go back in history, because people that are listening that've got a bit of whiskey knowledge, they know these stories about how there was these horrendous, multinationals that came around Scotland, the big whiskey conglomerates that basically took over the little guys. And essentially, William Grant and Sons, when it was Balvenie, just Balvenie and Glenfiddich, it was a small company. I mean, Grant's was there obviously, which is a massive blend. But how did the family stop from being, overtaken, if you like, from these big guys coming in? There must be some great stories based around that.
I'd say number one is sheer stubbornness. So, like a sense of being independent. So there's a great story that we do have it recorded somewhere, actually, of Uncle Charlie. He was fighting this stuff all the time just because he was so bloody minded, and that's one of the reasons we built Girvan, was so we could remain independent. And he's basically 2 fingers up yours to the Combine, as it was called at the time, which was now Diageo, and built Girvan so that we weren't being held to ransom by them. And I think it's just because he would have been 4th generation, so he also felt like that when all that was happening. So yeah, I think it's probably just part of the spirit of the family.
He's, I was lucky enough to meet your Uncle Charlie 3 or 4 times, and what an amazing guy. I remember when I first started, which was 2010, and it was the first time I met him, and Snow Phoenix was just about to come out, and I was like, well, what am I going to ask him? So I was like, let's ask him about Snow Phoenix. And he turned around to me, and I'll never forget this. He's like, Mitch, you know what? Packaging can look great, doesn't matter. If the liquid isn't good in the bottle, then it's all bullshit. And I was like, what a great, that was so refreshing to hear something like that coming from such an influential person within the whiskey industry, and obviously within William Grant and Sons at the time. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the prerequisites of coming into the business as a family member is you've got to have a passion for this industry. So, it's a bit of a running joke. Family are considered cheap labour, so it gives them an excuse not to pay us very well, number one. But, and also, my cousin's like, family members should be working till 10 o'clock at night every night. And, that's what I did at Matthew Clark for 10 years. So it's easy for me to do that, and you've got to really throw your heart and soul into it. So if you want to come as a family member and work in the business, it's not easy. It's not, it's not all about the glory and all that. It's bloody hard work. And you've got to really love the industry. And if you don't, and you're just there for, for an easy ride or a nice salary, you're not going to get that. It is not like that.
Very cool.
Fun though.
Well, do you know that's it? I would. It feels I can relate to that, not being in family business, but I think it's the type of personality that.
Yeah.
Certainly, whiskey. A lot of the people I've met who work in whiskey, whether those are in marketing or sales roles, distillery roles, finance, even. There is a type that it seems to attract in the end. And one of the things I noticed, and Kirsten, you must have seen this on a number of occasions, is. Some people give something else a try. They leave the drinks industry and they go and do something else. They always come back like boomerangs. I always say that. I say, I'll see you. If you leave, no problem. Good luck. All the best. But I'll see you at some point. What do you mean? I'm like, you'll be back in here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not interested in anything else. So, but they'll come back for sure.
You can tell. You're totally right, Daz. You can tell the people that sell batteries, razor blades, biscuits, and they don't last in whiskey, or you see a little bit of that at some of the bigger companies, but they don't last there either, because you got to have a passion for it. It's quite a nerdy, complex subject, and if you don't like it, then you're not going to enjoy being in the industry, because it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? Because the blurred lines very much are between your personal and your professional, and it is like that. It's a lifestyle.
Definitely. And most people go to another drinks company. Everyone just moves around, and I say to people, just never piss me off. You don't know when it's going to come back around again. Don't piss anyone off, because you don't know who'll be your next boss.
Well, it's such a small industry, right?
It is very small when you think about it. And actually, you guys will know this. We're all pretty good mates, really. There's no. People think on the surface we're not, but we are. I see all my competitors quite regularly. we might have boardroom scuffles or whatever, but, at our levels and at brand ambassador level, at sales level, even at management level, everyone knows each other because number one, you've got that intertrading of the liquid, number one, which is a good base for that. But you are always together when you're out in the markets. It's a small group of people.
There's a huge amount of respect between the companies as well, aren't there? I mean, look, nobody's looking at, and I always... I know Ian Miller used to say this over at Glenfiddich when he was doing the brand ambassadorial trips, is, your category first and then your kind of brand second, because if you're a category person, if you work for whiskey, then look, we can all win, we can all do quite well out of this.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. And I've seen examples where that's not been demonstrated by a couple of people. And, the whiskey world will turn on you as a group if you start to try and, pick on other people's brands or whatever. Nobody, you're not going to win if you do that.
Yeah. So I've got a question for you, right? I'm definitely of that mindset, and I'm very open about the whiskies I enjoy and things like that. You've got some great malt whiskies and Balvenie and Glenfiddich and Kinninvie. Ailsa Bay as well, one of the brands that you guys have got, which is delicious. Now, if you were taking your non-work hat off, or your work hat off, sorry, and you're going to go around and have a wee look and taste a wee whiskey, what's your tipple that's not one of those that you look after? Are you allowed to say that? Or
I am, because it's a fact, I would tell you Highland Park 25 is one of mine. I'm a really big fan of that. It's probably the immediate one that springs to mind. A lot of the stuff from Highland Park I really like.
My favourite whiskey ever is Highland Park 21.
We've tried some really rare and unusual things over the years, and then when you're in our position, you are spoiled beyond, and you're trying things out of people's suitcases. And then people are like, right.
That sounds really dodgy.
Well, it's true, everything's labelled 12, isn't it? And they're like, no, it's not.
No, totally. Well, we know that. Right, so one of the things that we do on the podcast is what we're drinking this week. So in your honour, we're having some Glenfiddich, which I'll just open up right now. But going back to Daz's question, put your work hat on. What's your favourite William Grant and Sons whiskey?
Everyone asks me this, and I'll give you the same answer, that it depends where you are, who you're with, drinking, who's
you don't get to that way. It's Desert Island. One
at the moment, I'm going to be quite thoughtful with it. At the moment, a constant favourite of mine, because it never disappoints me, is Balvenie Portwood. It's it's just outstanding.
Is this the 21?
21 Portwood,
So David Stewart, that's his favourite. He says that fairly often. I think I've heard Gemma say that as well. It seems to be.
Yeah, it's pretty good value because it's a little bit overaged.
Good value means there's a price increase coming, right? Is it?
No, there's not. But there's not. But in the stock models, there is some older Portwoods coming.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah. Because that's what we've got coming up now. And in terms of what, just one of the greatest whiskies of all time, I think, is Glenfiddich 15. Celerovat, for another reason, I think it's the best value. It's a great mixable whiskey. It's really approachable. It's quite a step change from 12. People are quite surprised when they try it, and it's just outstanding for me. So if I was having to pick two at the moment, but these things change when we bring out old things, new things, different things, cask things, all this stuff.
No, I think the 15 just. Value for money is unbelievable.
Value for money, it's outstanding.
I think it always drinks a lot older than it actually is. Well, I've given it to people blind before, and they think. Yeah.
And it's also when we did some stuff when I was running the London Prestige team, we dropped in 1815 to bartenders to play about with for cocktails, and it's always the one that they wanted to use.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had a wee fox. The wee baby fox has just come down into my kitchen.
Actually, into the kitchen.
Just came down to the edge. It's sat right. It's just gone back. That's why I stood up to get it out.
So back to whiskey. Let's move away from William Grant and Sons here for a second. What do you think of the state of the whiskey industry right now in Scotland?
Wow, I think it's going gangbusters. I'm really happy to see such a buoyant industry. I don't know. I'm thinking about all these new distilleries, and hoping that that doesn't cause problems in the future. That everything is good and everything's working together and we don't have too much or all this sort of stuff. So, when you suddenly get an explosion of distilleries, it just needs to be managed properly so whiskey remains, with the integrity that it always should do and all the rest of it, and that, you don't get into any kind of horrible disagreements between the different companies because they're all so new or whatever, but, I'm really happy with it. The part of the industry that I'm a little bit also skeptical about is all the cask investment stuff. That whole investment stuff. I mean, every week we get something through with people promising these massive big returns, and 582% is a number that comes up all the time, and it's simply not going to last. The bubble is going to burst, and when it bursts, it's going to be one big shit show of cheap whiskey on the market and a lot of disappointed people, and that's not good for the industry. And we've actually reported to the SWA some of these things, because you can read facts that are categorically not true. Things like, well, this cask will yield 263 bottles at this. How do you know that? You don't know that unless it's already in bottle, So there's facts in there that are not true. You've got lots of people trying to make money off something that, it's just not going to work. It will not. All the promises that are in these documents will not come true. Some of them might, but a lot of them won't. And, you talk to our stocks guy, Ken McKinley, he's got his head in his hands with it. And one of the advantages we've got is you will very, very rarely see any of our stuff being sold in a cask, because we were never really involved in any of that. So, some comes up every now and again, but it's very, very rare. But, there's a lot of companies have got a lot of this stuff out there, and everyone's been saving it all for all these people that know nothing about this industry and think they're going to cash in. And who's going to bottle it for them? So all this stuff. Who's going to sell it for them? This is all going to turn a bit messy in about 10 years' time, and that's what worries me a little bit.
So the good and the bad. And then let's talk. You're the first female to come on our little podcast, which is long overdue since we've done, what's this, the 6th episode right now. But Daz and I have both been around so many amazing females within the whiskey industry, and I think, I hope that the attitude towards females have totally changed over the last decade or so. What's been your experience? When
I first joined the business, even Grants, so I've been 10 years at William Grant's now. I got my long service award.
Did you get a bottle of something nice?
No, I didn't. I got a check. I got a check for £500, and my cousin said, "Buy yourself a nice shoe."
He knows you too well.
No, even in the time that I've been at William Grant's, I've seen a big difference in the attitudes towards women in the industry. I mean, sort of interesting position for me, because I'm the youngest of my generation and the only female working in the business, really. So, I have female cousins, but they're not connected to the business. So I'm kind of the only girl, which for me, I'm just a girl in a boy's world, is how we kind of view it. But because that's quite a unique position. But in terms of the whiskey industry more generally, it's definitely a different place than it was 10 years ago. And William Grant's is a different company, definitely. So, we still got a lot of work to do with our gender balance, and, we've got a huge push of D&I, and we're working really hard at that. And, but I can see it. It's definitely a much different place now.
But I think your personality kind of suits working in the whiskey industry, right? You're not going to be offended when I say that you are a bit of a tomboy and you can hang boys more than any female possibly.
Yes. Actually, I was out with George Grant on Friday night, and there was a guy with us who neither of us know very well, but he's going to rent some office space from us in Richmond office, and he tried to take us on.
That's schoolboy right there.
Yeah. Another guy was with us who knows George, and I was like, it's not going to work. And
he's still in bed today on Tuesday, 4 days later. Yeah.
He's broken.
Yeah. So
did he poke the bear?
No, I think it was just like a rabbit in headlights. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a bit of a tomboy, but that's life. That's probably why I managed to survive the early days in the drinks business.
So tell us, best experience to date in the whiskey industry. Like what's been?
Oh wow, you can't say that again, Mitch. I mean, we've had so many good times, haven't we? I think at a very top level, it's the traveling that you get to do and the people that you get to meet. And then when you meet somebody in an obscure place and they just tell you how much they love your product, it makes you remember why we do it and why we've got the blood, sweat and tears and all the rest of it, and whiskey fans are obsessive, I mean, I'm actually not on any social media because I was almost getting stalked, People phone up the business looking to talk to me and all this sort of stuff, because people are obsessed with it. And, and they come and they're like wanting to touch you and have you sign the bottles and all that sort of stuff, which is quite amazing, really. We're not that good.
I mean, it's funny. There's a guy, Stevie Martin, that works with me over here. And he was actually in LA and he'd gone, he'd gone from LA, further south into California somewhere, San Diego, I think is where he was. And I think there's some military bases down there or something like that. So he'd gone to the pub. And he was just having a couple of drinks on his own. And these two American guys come in and he starts chatting to them. And it turns out there are a couple of Marines who've come back from the Middle East or something like that. They'd been away for 6 months. So they were looking for a couple of good drinks. So they asked Stevie, they're like, Stevie, where is it you're from? And he's like, well, I'm from Scotland. They're like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I work in whiskey. They were like, oh my God, there's this amazing comedian who does stuff about whiskey. And they're like, all right, who's that? And he's like, oh, I can't remember his name. So they go onto YouTube and they pick this video out, and it's a video of Richard Patterson, who they genuinely think is a comedian and not a whiskey maker, and Stevie's like, no, I work with that guy. He's a real whiskey maker. They're like, nah, fuck off, man. And so he's like, no. So he gets like an email out or a social media post or something with him and Richard. He's like, no, genuinely, I work with this guy back in Scotland, and they're like, oh, no way. I think they were actually disappointed that he wasn't a comedian and he actually is a whiskey maker.
I guess he told Patterson that then.
I don't think he did, actually. I don't think Richard ever heard that story. But it's funny because it is, as you go around the world, it's amazing the people that you meet who are come across whiskey, found out about it through something or somebody. And it never surprises you anymore, what the connections are, it's brilliant.
It was like that. I was full of people who, Glenfiddich, oh wow, this sort of stuff now. Fiddick. I have to go around to every state one by one. But yeah, and they just can't believe it. It's like a different world for them.
Yeah, it was funny. I mean, I remember having to act as your bodyguard a couple of times because, doing like take things with you and people are like, oh my God.
I know. I mean,
touch her and like.
I know. It's I had to have
a little bit.
Yeah, I had bodyguards in Poland actually, security, because people were like trying to get really close to you and touch you. Oh, it was horrible, but it's just because they're so obsessed with the product. It's not me they're obsessed with; it's the product.
See, Daz and I don't mind that. We don't mind getting touched when we're.
It's fine. I mean, I remember going out to Russia. And dealing with their kind of passion for whiskey, which is, enthusiastic is an understatement. And the number of times I've had to go into the Russian saunas, the banyas, to drink whiskey and then come out and go into the rivers, cold rivers, the frozen rivers and stuff. It's pretty insane. And what's not in your contract is that, they expect you to, obviously conform to the local culture and the way that they do things.
Oh, yeah.
And typically in Siberia, that's with no clothes on in the banya, you know, in the sauna.
Uh-huh.
So you're there with a glass of Macallan or Glenfiddich or whatever it might be, and you're sipping away, and you're just kind of going, this is bizarre, you know. I'm not really quite sure how to talk about this again, if I'm doing the right thing, but you know, I'm doing what everybody else is doing. A man comes in with a little stick and starts hitting your skin because it's good for your circulation.
I haven't had to do that.
Yeah.
I like the way
I'm still not sure if it was actually the cultural.
I think you've been had. You're the first person to tell me that, and I know our Russia team.
I'm going to stop talking now.
You gone bright red?
I know. Was that only me? Jeez,
I've had to. I tell you though, I've had to eat some weird food to get a deal over the line as well. You know. I've had people sit and watch me, and they just know if you don't eat that, they're not going to do the deal. And yeah, I'm like, oh, please stop.
So I think the one that really kind of caught my throat was the octopus beak.
Octopus beak.
Yeah, that was a Taiwanese sort of delicacy, and it was quite nice, I must say. But sort of hearing it and hearing what it was sounded more horrific than it actually was. It was probably the most pleasant.
For me, it's the sea cucumber.
Yeah, I think it's also like the culture in some places where you have to down single malt Scotch whisky in a one, which
in the Korean market, there's a lot of that goes on, and a lot of crying and singing. And
do you know, the crying thing is so true. It's bizarre because you've got the gambé, so everyone's necking, and you toast everyone, and you have to drink with them. And I remember the first time I went to Taiwan, there was 2 people cried at our table, 2 people fell asleep. And I, of course, held it all together with supreme dignity and form and grace.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, some of the things you see.
Yeah, you were actually one of them, Daz.
Well, apparently, I remember speaking to Hannah, my wife, the day after that, and she was like, "You left me a really bizarre voicemail." And I was like, "Oh, did I?" And she's like, "Yeah, you were trying to speak Chinese."
Again.
And I think the Taiwanese guys were obviously encouraging this, and I was obviously, Hannah couldn't understand anything I was trying to say, and that's the last she heard from me for about 24 hours. You know. Well, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Such an interesting insight into life at William Grant's, and also just life in whiskey in general. You have spent a lot of time in and around it, and it was also really cool actually to go back to those wine days, the heady days where we used to cruise around town, enjoying samples. Cocktails. Yeah. You know, where we could actually go out to bars and stand at the bar and heckle the staff.
Yes. Who was it? I think it's Mike and Jason chucked me out of Bramble one night for singing a song to Jason about where did you get that hat? Threw me out. I don't think they let me back out of the bar, I can't remember.
No, it's really cool. That's so nice to see you again, and it's never a dull moment, as I'm sure.
Definitely not. And I say this to people quite often. We're in the business of fun. Don't take life too seriously. I think sometimes people forget that. I say to people, at least we don't sell washing machines or something like that.
Toilet paper.
You got to have some passion for it. It's a really, really, really cool industry. And we're responsible for keeping it that way.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Kirsten, thanks again for jumping on our wee podcast, and great to see you.
No problemo. Good to see you guys too. Don't be strangers.
Cheers.
All right, guys. So great to have Kirsten on the episode. We need to do an X-rated version where we talk about all the things that we've got up to over the years with her, because I've had some absolutely mental times with her. Great to have her on. Anyway, let's get back to some of the regular parts of the show, starting with
Daz and Mitch's Whiskey News of the Week.
In the news, Mitch, this week, I think this is really interesting. You and I are massive fans of grain whiskey. I've got a 29-year-old here, Glaswegian. I sit and sip away at that all the time. But it has to be said, there hasn't been many grain distilleries opened. when was the last grain distillery that opened in Scotland? You know, I know there's been a few closed. When we were at Diageo back in the day, Port Dundas was closed. So I was really, really excited to see in the news the Scottish borders might be getting a grain distillery. Jackson Distillers have announced a £46 million investment plan with that grain distillery opening in 2023. That's massive. You know, St Boswell's is where it's going to be. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. You know, it's just a press release. I've seen some pictures of the distillery itself. But yeah, that's big news, man.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's almost like every week there's a new distillery opening up or news of a new distillery going to be opening up.
But it's always malt.
Yeah, it's true. Never grain.
Yeah.
So that is exciting. Yeah. I think one of the things for me, you know, in the news, it was, and Kirsten already touched on this earlier on, but is the whole cask investment thing that's going on right now. And, you know, Blair Bowman wrote an interesting article in Cask and Still that went into a load of details on how he believes these companies are, you know, verging on being, well, some of them can be fraudulent in a way, and you know, promising, as Kirsten mentioned as well, over 500% return on investment, all this kind of stuff, which is really kind of, you know, I agree with her 100% and Blair 100% on this. It's quite a dangerous road to go down if you're looking at buying a whiskey cask for an investment. You know, I bought one about a year ago now, but that was directly from the distillery. It wasn't from a broker. So I think this could be a little episode for us, Daz. What do you think? Like, dig into this whole cask investment thing and see what's going on there?
Yeah, no, totally. I've been in and out of this over the years through Macallan, where we used to run the On Premier program, and of course over at Dalmore, where there's a very established sort of private client side of things with, you know, cask sales direct to you know, buyers, investors, whatever it is they want to do with it, really. But there is this kind of murky world for me in this unknown. You know, if you're not buying it from the producer themselves, where is that cask? Who actually owns it? And what happens when the time comes to bottle it, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
So there's a lot of implications, you know, that I see the numbers, you know, it's $3,500 to buy a cask. Yeah, it is, but when you take that cask out of bond, it's probably $3,500 on duty. It's probably going to cost you a couple of grand to get it bottled and sorted, you know, for you to enjoy at some point. So yeah, maybe unpeeling some of these little things that people need to watch out for.
Well, let's put that one on the back burner, because on Monday we go to Islay, where we're going to record an episode, and we are going to do it this time.
Guess the whiskey, 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 guess the whiskey.
Last episode, I said this distillery was previously owned by Seagram's, produced a smoky distillate for blending purposes, and the Paterson crash caused it to close its doors for 65 years. It recently opened a new visitors centre. It was, of course, Benriach, which is one of my favourite single malts right now. Absolutely fantastic juice. Sorry, Kirsten, if you're still listening to this, but yeah, it's some of the stuff they're doing right now. You know, Rachel's just absolutely knocking it out of the park, I think, with all the new expressions that have come out recently. So, Daz, over to you, man. What do you got? What's your guess? The distillery.
This distillery has very, very, very recently undergone a huge refurbishment project. That's one clue. The Gaelic term means foot of the river, and this distillery, we're going to Islay, so this distillery is one of the Islay distilleries. So those are your three clues for Guess the Whiskey. Big fan of this distillery. I don't know why. It's so charming. I love the whiskies. I love the spot.
All right, guys. So thank you so much for listening this week. Like I said, we will come to you not live, but in person from Islay next week. So looking forward to that. And then we're going to get our disguises on and get this, cask thing. We're going to dig into that, go undercover, man. Get some fake email addresses together, see what's going on there. But guys,
those sets of glasses with the wee nose and the moustache and just sort of cruise around the distilleries. Yeah.
I've got the nose already, mate. So I don't need that.
I'm just going to be looking like you, exactly.
All right, guys. So thanks for listening, and catch you next time.